And those who possess the gifts were literally given on an as-needed basis. When men would need to know something about God's will, they would have to have somebody who was endowed with a gift in order to know what thus saith the Lord. But Paul said that when the perfect is come, then that which is done in part shall be done away. The perfect is come. It is the complete written revelation of God's will for mankind. And because we have this perfect law of liberty, then we no longer need for the word to be confirmed. God had decided that the time was coming when his word would be complete and sufficient enough to let a man know what he needed to do in order to get right with him. This perfect law of liberty, James 1:25, is what a man needs to look into if he wants to know how to be right with God. If a man today wants to know what God has determined for his life, he don't need no man that claims that he has a revelation, because God has put everything that needed to be revealed in his word. And no longer would a man need to speak in an unknown tongue. No longer would a man need somebody to prophesy unto him. No longer would you need somebody to have the gift of healing to make you believe something that you don't believe already. God decided that he had a time coming when he had a better way of revealing his will to mankind. God decided that he had a plan that was going to help man understand what it was that God expects from him, so the man could just go to the word himself. God decided to put the perfect together. He started with Genesis and didn't end until he got to Revelation. He gave us 66 books, 39 in the Old, 27 in the New. Everything I need to know about God, everything I need to know about living for God, everything I need to know about how to be right with God, I can just look in the book. If I want to know how God wants me to worship, I can just look in the book. If I want to know how to be saved by God, I can just look in the book. If I want to know how to be a good daddy to my children, I can just look in the book. If you want to know, mama, how to be a good mama, just look in the book.
Yes, sir.
If I want to know how to be a good spouse,
yes, sir. Come on.
I can just look in the book.
Yes, sir.
If I want to know how to be a good neighbor, I can just look in the book. If I want to know how to be a good co-worker, I can just look in the book. John says in his book, in chapter 20, verses 30 and 31, that there was some more things that Jesus did which he did not write in that book. He said, but there is enough written in this book that you can believe, and that believing you might have a life in his name. What was some of those things that the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John said the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him there was not anything made that was made. In chapter 2, John wrote in the book that Jesus went down to Cana of Galilee and turned water into wine. When the folk had drunk up all the manufactured stuff and they got to what Jesus had turned into wine, they told the host that you saved the best for last. In chapter 3, John wrote that he was talking, Jesus was talking to Nicodemus and telling him that except a man be born again, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. In chapter 4, John wrote in the book that Jesus is talking to a woman at the well and telling her, woman, I got some water that you can drink from and that you will quench your thirst forever. You won't have to come back to this well to draw. In chapter 5, John wrote in the book that Jesus is down by the pool of Bethesda healing a man who hadn't walked in 38 years by saying, rise up and take up your bed and walk. In chapter 6, John wrote in the book that Jesus took 2 fish and 5 barley loaves and fed over 5,000 men. In chapter 7, John wrote in the book that Jesus is talking to the Jews and telling them that he that believeth on me, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. In chapter 8, John wrote in the book that Jesus got a woman away from some hypocrites because they claimed to have caught her in the very act of adultery. But by the time Jesus got up, after he had told them that ye who are without sin cast the first stone, all of them hypocrites went home and the woman was free of charge. In chapter 8, we see Jesus healing a man that has been born blind by spitting on the ground and putting the spit and the clay on the man's eyes and telling him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. In chapter 10, John wrote in the book that Jesus said, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. In chapter 11, John wrote in the book that Lazarus was dead for 4 long days, but death ain't no problem for Jesus because he stood on the outside and said, Lazarus, come forth. In chapter 12, John wrote in the book that Mary broke open an alabaster box of ointment and anointed Jesus' feet. Jesus said she had done that against the day of his burial. In chapter 13, John wrote in the book that Jesus got up from supper, filled a basin with water, put a towel around his waist, and started washing his disciples' feet. When it came to Brother Peter, Peter said, Lord, you ain't gonna wash my feet. But the Lord said, Peter, if I don't wash your feet, then you won't have no part with me. And that's when Peter said, don't stop with my feet, but why don't you get my hands and get my head too?
Yes, sir.
In chapter 14,
come on now.
I hear him say, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. Jesus said, I go